John Heaton. Anybody recognize that name? You shouldn't. This picture was taken in, probably about 1950, early 50s. And the gentleman in question, this is Mr. Heaton. And during World War II, he was a petroleum engineer working for the United States Army. And from about 1943 on, he was involved from the technical aspects of the military's absolute dire, they were just being killed, not by Germans, but by mechanical failures on the battlefield. We lost more equipment, tanks, mechanized equipment, during the war to breakdowns and inability to keep the components operating than they did to enemy fire. And that's saying a lot considering the amount of enemy fire that was going on in World War II. And Mr. Heaton was one of the people that was approached by the military saying, you know, we got to have some kind of improvement in these oils. We're not being able to maintain our equipment and battle readiness. You know, the war was long from over. Long story short, he came up with what he called, and to this day, I can't even tell you the specific formula, but he called it vaclaisocryptine. I'll say that again because it sounds like something out of a Superman movie. Vaclaisocryptine. What it is in a nutshell is a penetrating lubricant molecular bonding agent. And that's about as technical as I can get about it. And as I say, they don't talk about it, even the parent company, because since the company's inception, going back to 1946, there have been at least 40 or 50 that I'm aware of, that they're aware of, attempts to either buy the company outright or infiltrate it, industrial espionage-like, to try and figure out what this vaclaisocryptine, which he called for short VAC5, constituted, because they were seeing the results were far beyond any other lubrication on the product, public or private. But decade in, decade out, the Heatons would never sell. They were parent. They were their own parent company, privately held, privately owned, and they are making millions of dollars every month by selling it simply FOB from their plant straight to military installations, governments around the world. All our oil companies use it. We're about to look at that history, rather intriguing. But no one has ever heard of this man, and I'll close as far as his reference with a little story about his death, which was about 3.5, 4 years ago now, about 92, I believe. And I only found out about it a couple years after. I must have been one of the few people not invited to this thing, because he was buried at Arlington, and he had an 11-mile-long funeral procession. Ambassadors, senators, politicos of all shapes and sizes, and military advisors, and military personnel came to this man's funeral. And you never heard of him, no one's heard of him, but in the military-industrial complex, he's an icon, because even 50 years later, they're still using his product because they haven't been able to find anything better. I can give you the most recent information I have on that from about 6 months ago. The president of the company told me that I can't remember which firm it was, but he had been offered to be bought out by almost all of the oil companies at different times, off and on, and refused because he just didn't need them. And we tried to, as I say here locally, about 12 years ago to retail it to the public, and they still try. We're going to see the product as the incarnation that is available today, which is in the bookstore behind us here, is now, they're calling it NITRO-9. But you're going to see several different variants from all over the world from other distributors that carry the product. But anyway, so Mr. Heaton gets a funeral fit for a royalty, frankly, and by the turnout, a celebrity. But in industries and circles that you wouldn't normally anticipate such celebrity to be followed to such an extent. And I'm going to just can I zoom this back a little bit and get more of the paper image without mucking up too much? Well, so that I don't have to play moving it back and forth and up and down. I'm going to start staccato-like throwing at you just to get us a running feel for this long history of this product by letting you see some of the users that have at least allowed their name to be publicized without any specifics. For example, Pepsi-Cola and Coca-Cola battle all the time. Pepsi-Cola has been using this product for decades. They don't want Coca-Cola to know that. They want Coca-Cola to think that their quarterly earnings are whatever cents better because the product has been sold. And in reality, it's the maintenance and service bay guys that have helped the bottom line at Pepsi-Cola because of the savings that this product has. I'll outline them to you. I guess you can see. Those are too small. Let me give you some bigger ones. I'm going to run by quite a few of these. I even have the actual stubs themselves from varieties of users because the president of the company just said, well, here's some from the 70s and the 80s. And the literature that I'll be showing you now goes all the way back to the 40s, all major users. How many oil additives do you know that are registered with the Atomic Energy Commission? It gets funner. Dating all the way back to 1954. (1950) U.S. Department of Agriculture. And down on the bottom here, this material has been tested and there is no other known substitute. That's the government's phraseology, not Champion Lubricants. As I say, I'm just going to kind of speed through these. Get you guys a feel. Texas company, before it was Texaco. Gulf, Superior. Now, we're not going to have, you don't have to read this. I'll just tell you synopsis. This is a letter from 1949, a trucking company. Mr. Heaton simply asked for reference or referral or whatever they wanted to say about the product. And not necessary for you to be able to read that, but what that is that's 2 months at the top of the maintenance and repair service records for his trucking fleet compared to 2 months at the bottom after they were treated with the Champion Lubricant product line. And long story short, the top 2 months have failures of mechanical nature left, right, and center. Both months throughout the trucking fleet. All kinds of variations. The bottom 2 months, it either says no repairs necessary, or it has to do with things like blown tires and busted mechanical equipment that has nothing to do with lubrication. Whereas before, there was all kinds of lubricated mechanical parts that were failing or wearing out. The product has expanded worldwide. This is just the Norwegian territorial distributor representative. And I show you just that particular country because we then, a few years later, got this letter back from them because it's all kind of like word of mouth worldwide that this is, has been sold. The marketing is basically been kind of like the aerospace industry. You don't see them advertising. Well, they all advertise internally, trade and peer-reviewed publications and information, and the trade representatives to each other. They know who they are. Retail public doesn't have to be involved. This letter and the Norwegian naval cruiser that is on it has a huge hydraulically operated turret gun in the front. And what the letter goes on to say is that we had, of course, in the North Sea, it gets pretty cold, and they were having a lot of trouble keeping the hydraulic fluid operating. and or at least efficiency of it was pretty poor with minus 30 degrees Celsius temperatures. They added this to the hydraulic fluid blend, and the result was revealing. It took almost half the time for the gun to turn from port side to starboard side than it did with just their normal lubrication in the equipment. Then in the good old US of A, we prefer entertainment to war. And so there's a lot more use of the product here in more, shall we say, recreational applications like racing. This is a Formula Ford Atlantic Series race car that Champion Lubricants has been sponsoring for some 10, 15 years that I'm aware of, that dominates, if not in race results, in a lack of need for mechanical repairs to the level of their competitors. And we did here some local, here in Arizona, treatments for some cars that we wanted to bring in to show people the local drivers of sport vehicles. This guy, Brian Clifton, is the, I think now the only 5-time winner of the Eloy Grand Prix, which I know that's not Monaco, but here in Arizona, it's a city about 50 miles south of us where they've had a Grand Touring car, multiple class Grand Prix every year for, gosh, must be at least 25, 30 years now. This guy's won it 5 times, and the last 3 were after we treated his vehicle with our component lubricants. And I'll give you another example. Not only does he win, he doesn't have the repair and wear factor issues that the other drivers have to contend with. And longevity, even if it's only in a 2-hour race, can be crucial. How many times do we see these Formula One cars, millions and millions of dollars invested, and they're out of the race in a minute and a half because some simple little component failed? This is a good example of what I'm talking about. This is a local Phoenix top fueler dragster, and they run on basically rocket fuel, methanol and whatnot. And they are so stressed in the quarter mile that usually the main failure component are the crankcase bearings. They have to replace them after just about every race. And if they, at the very least, they crack it open and test them and look at them, but they never go more than 2, at the most 3 races. This vehicle, after we treated it, went 11 races without opening the crankcase. And when they did, not the kind of damage that you see after 1 or 2 races without the product, where the bearings are literally crushing each other. Not a problem with this product. And yeah, this guy started winning a lot after we gave him the product. People are probably familiar with that manufacturer. Continental Motors is a major diesel motor manufacturer for not only ground transportation but airplanes. Again, 1949, all the way back then, they're saying, love the product, you can use it in all our motors, because that's what we were asking back in the 40s, you know, trying to establish warranty reference, and is there any problem with us putting this in any vehicle? And I'm not going to go through all of them, but Continental is one example. This is a Cummins diesel. Everyone knows them. Here's John Deere. And what they're referencing in this letter is simply brake horsepower testing that they did on John Deere tractors and heavy tractor-like machinery. And I believe, is probably you can see there, that they were getting increases in brake horsepower, I think up to 7 and 8. Eight horsepower increase after 1 application of the product. Now we start getting into some of the fun and interesting history of living in a capitalist country. Yeah, that's Atlantic Richfield. And no, they don't want to advertise this fact, but they sent a letter to Mr. Heaton. When Mr. Heaton asked for something, he gets it. They had And this wasn't even a motor application. This was simply for the gearing equipment that cranks the, it's not compressors, it's I don't know what they're calling it, but it's an electrical component that runs the drilling rigs that each drilling rig has to have for that continuous 24-hour day operation, unmanned, unattended. And after 42 days of using our product, the kilowatt demand for that machinery dropped a total of 29.4%. Yes, sir. Oh, it's an additive. Yeah, it's not an oil in itself. It will mix with any kind of oil, even synthetic. This is one I particularly enjoy. Now we get into more of the mercantile applications. Yes, it's a huge cruise ship. And the punchline here, and all they were doing here, was testing the fuel blend. They didn't have the oil blend in there to reduce the friction and increase mileage and whatnot from that, or any of the other lubricants, just the gasoline additive going in the fuel tanks on this cruise ship on one trip. And I don't know if you were able to read it there, but they saved in one trip a total of 159 burning hours on the high seas. They used close to 3,500 gallons less fuel. This product pays for itself practically before you get it in the car. Yep, that's the LEM, Lunar Landing Module for the Apollo Moon mission series. Another military type application problem. This was a real headache for the engineers at NASA. The legs on the spider-like legs on the lunar lander are totally exposed to the atmosphere. They're not closed, sealed systems. And when you're dealing with the cryogenic to the 200 degrees plus shifts in temperature that can happen in seconds and then happen repeatedly, you really challenge lubrication, let alone the mechanical parts that are being lubricated. And no lubrication in the 60s that NASA could find could withstand that change and leave them still sure that it was going to work. And you don't want to be playing iffy games when you're going to drop two guys on the moon. Well, Mr. Heaton again comes to the rescue. I'll read it to you, but I wanted you to at least see. This is Convair, General Dynamics division, who handle all of the construction of the external components on the LEM. And down in the bottom corner, and these are the prerequisites that they have demanded of Convair as the contractor. And the fourth prerequisite, solid film lubricant to be applied in accordance with FPS 0058 Type A, to be accomplished by Champion Products in Stevensville, Texas. Specific, no other place to go. They went to Mr. Heaton, who, interestingly enough, in the early 70s, had a, well, let's call it a cell phone. In reality, it was a satellite phone. In reality, it was a James Bond-like satellite phone. He had his own metal briefcase carried around with a phone that he could pick it up, use any of the military SATs, and talk to anybody all over the world. And he had nothing to do with the government, not a stitch, just sold a product to them. Another benefit of his position in the lubricant world, this is a great story the president told me only last year. The president, Mr. Heaton, was in the Middle East dealing with another oil crisis. They oftentimes call him. That's why he has the satellite phone. He can go anywhere, anytime. They were having a lubrication failure issue with aircraft carriers in the Red Sea, in the Middle East, Persian Gulf somewhere. I'm not sure. And they literally called him up because they didn't want to wait to come back to Pearl Harbor or wherever. They called him up and flew him out to look and deal with this lubrication problem. These jets were too valuable to just have them sit. Solve that problem, and his then vice president, who's the president that I've been talking about that I'm getting this information from, was in, I believe, either Argentina or Chile at the time. So they each resolved their respective issues that they were dealing with, and about the same time, Mr. Heaton popped on the satellite phone and called him, his VP in Chile, and told him that, we got a big meeting for whatever, we need to get back to home base, and I wanted you to jump on a plane and meet me there. He's in the Middle East. VP's in South America. The VP gets home, and Mr. Heaton's there to greet him. And he's flabbergasted. He said, "How did you get here? How did you beat me?" He said, "Well," and he smiled a big grin and said, "Well, I hitched a ride on an SR-71. There apparently is a pop or something back seat, and Mr. Heaton got there within, I think, 4.5 hours, while the vice president taking a 14-hour haul up from Chile." And they were able to get the government to just, yeah, we got a spare one sitting out here we're not using tonight. Why don't you see that Mr. Heaton gets to his meeting in time? Just trying to give you a picture of what we're dealing with here with this subject matter. And to these two guys, that was just a joke. They were telling me a joke about how funny, a little funny thing that happened. But you and I know that that's a pretty interesting little funny thing that happened. Some of the other realities of why this product has so much benefit beyond just its lubrication is over the last 10 years, we've seen all the transitions, and even without the transitions to leadless fuel and whatnot, and air pollution quality demands that are put on the fuel's construction and the way it's formulated, the gasoline quality is just going to hell in a handbasket, and we all know it because we drive in our cars every day and feel it. It wasn't an old problem. It's been around a long time. It's not something new to us, but this product eliminates most of the issues. If you get a tank of bad gas, you're not going to get the damage and the problems that you would if you didn't have the additive. Leaded fuel, of course, is now no longer available, but a lot of us are driving around in cars that require it. Valving was necessary for it, and the classic collectors and whatnot are just sitting here going, well, roll it up on the semi. I'm not going to drive the thing anywhere, not only because it's, of course, my show car, but I'm not going to do any more damage than I have to that engine. Well, this also eliminates the need for lead in gasoline. So that was a big push for the company, again, in exploring the retail market, was this lead being removed from gasoline over, I guess, an 8-year period in the 80s. Now this is a good test example. And this, by the way, is actually Mr. Heaton, a letter Mr. Heaton himself to put together in 1986. And what it basically says is that because they get asked oftentimes to, give us some examples, give us some proofs, give us some tests, because so far basically what you're seeing is simply user information and their results and satisfaction. But with each passing decade, things became more and more sophisticated in the demands of the public and the private users of this product for, why should I grab your product as opposed to the 47 others I can get for 1/10 of the cost? We don't even need to get into you get what you pay for in this world, but the realities of business and marketing are that Mr. Heaton had to start bending some of his preferable rules to not talk to the public about who's using what and in what applications. But they did a test here because of the phasing out of leaded fuel. He bought a I guess it was 69 Carmen Ghia. And it was an air-cooled engine, and they were going to test again just the gasoline additive. Because of there being no lead, they wanted to be able to show people what was possible. The engine was overhauled and put in all new condition. Since this was a specific test, the only observations were on valves and seats. The engine was run 216,000 miles, both on the road and about 2/3 of the time on a block. At the 216,000 mile mark, the engine swallowed a valve and other valves, swallowed a valve and was shut down. The engine was disassembled. The other valves showed no burns, no leaks, All the seats were the same. The compression was down only 5, 7, and 6 pounds on cylinders 3, 4, and 1. The only change from normal running was oil changes every 3,000 miles with this oil additive. So that was kind of the beginning, mid-'80s. That's when I got involved with the company, of the Mr. Heaton and the parent company beginning to meld and bend a little in their willingness to address people's inquiries about why is this stuff so great and why haven't I never heard of it? Even in '86, it was 40 years old. Another interesting benefit. And I guess on the note of benefits, probably a good time for me to give you guys a handout that I made it up. Let me rephrase that. I put it together because I think in a nutshell it says succinctly all the different beneficial applications of the product line. Let's try throwing those around, probably enough. If you could be so kind as to see how far out you can scatter that. Anybody that doesn't get one when the dust settles, of course I have more. This is an emission test done here locally. It's a again, simply just using the oil and the fuel blend additive. This vehicle, which is a, I guess it doesn't tell me what the vehicle is on this particular setup, but these are the readings on hydrocarbons and CO counts before the fuel blend was added. The idle was at 1100 RPM. CO count was 9.0. Hydrocarbon count was 800. They added the fuel blend while the engine's running. 2 minutes later, the idle had gone up to 1300. CO count was down to 8.8. Hydrocarbons down to 620. 4 minutes later, the idle was now 900. You seeing that curved transition that was going on there? 4 minutes in, it was 900 idle. The CO count was 9.13, and the hydrocarbons 1,039. You're seeing again what's happening here. Because at the 12-minute point is the punchline of what appears to be rising numbers. No, this is just a generic review of all of the benefits that were tested and laboratorily proven. Everything on that sheet is nothing that somebody just guesstimated or came up with. I personally reviewed every one of those stats and the technical papers and research and lab work that went into getting those numbers. So there's nothing marketing about it except that those are just the facts in each of the different applications. Anyways, after 12 minutes, the RPM was 1,000. CO had gone down to 4.82. Hydrocarbons were at 169. Those are extremely dramatic changes in 12 minutes. These we all can relate to. Dun, 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 dun. I'm going to read this one, show you that one. Then I'll read whatever you can't read on that. Simple numbers again. The first test on this vehicle, the CO count, which is allowable of 1.20 on this vehicle was, and let me reread that and rephrase how we do these numbers. The allowable maximum is 0.20. This vehicle's reading on the first test, 0.02. Now this, and that's one nice area where this correlates to our gathering here, this comes scarily close to some of the machinery we have out here in the foyer that didn't come off at an assembly line in Detroit. And it has nothing to do with the motor. It's simply this gasoline additive. The one here, the first reading was on hydrocarbons. Oh, let me give you the allowable on hydrocarbons. I guess I didn't give you that on this one. Yeah. The allowable on hydrocarbons is, oh, I did do hydrocarbons. Anyways, I did say at the outset, you're going to have to bear with me as we kind of move around. All the stuff that we had intended, at least I had intended in the way that this was to be presented, required equipment we don't have and couldn't get because of, well, let's just leave it at other factors. But this vehicle, when it went through, had a first idle hydrocarbon reading was 0.03. I mean, the point here is these numbers are so close to zero that if you ever had talked to somebody, if you didn't know Paul Pantone before, and said, you know, what can you expect to come out of a tailpipe of an internal combustion gasoline engine, nobody in any scientific field or any aspect of petroleum engineering would have said, well, if it's a new car or it's clean and you haven't got a lot of miles on it, something in the 0.00 flat line area would not be the answer you'd get. But with putting this product in, it practically burned clean. That's just the efficiency of the burn, because we know the GEET processor is a totally different process, but it gets similar results. But to get it with a Detroit motor and the Seven Sisters product in the gas tank is a pretty interesting phenomenon, especially for 50-odd plus years to date. And in that 50 years, it's spread its wings all over the world. It's just a smattering of publications from countries, mostly Western. We're trying to get it now into the Eastern Bloc, which curiously enough, and I'm sure it had to do something with the 50-plus odd year relationship with a certain military institution in this country, that is the reason that Russia has never had an opportunity to get this product, but they do now. It's one of the things that we're trying to do here at Exotic Research is expose them to this market. If you think we've got bad gas or not spending enough time in the cracking tower for certain byproducts of the petroleum industry, you don't want to know what comes out of refineries in the Soviet Union. Can't do anything but help to add these to their equipment. Because as you'll notice, for example, one of the references on the list there is your lifetime expectancy of equipment minimum doubles, usually triples. And now that the Russians are our friends, nah, anything for a buck. That's America. I was alluding to this a little earlier, but just as a visual mindset. Just another magazine you're not going to find out on the newsstand rack in New York. Peer-reviewed journals in this case, this is a farming implement company. So you know there are thousands of these inside and internal publications that never see the light of day except in the industries in which they're involved. Champion Lubricants is known throughout all of them. Whether it's automotive parts or farm implements or 18-wheeler diesel truck owners and that entire industry. They love this stuff. Just as a stat, there was a test done, and you've seen a more recent oil additive company do this. It was a test done where they took, in this case, I think it was 1969. No, 77, Pontiac, I think, vehicle, and emptied the crankcase, drained it dry. Of course, that had the oil additive in it, but it's gone now. We're going to find out in a few minutes it wasn't gone, but the crankcase was empty of oil. Ran 105 miles nonstop without any oil in the crankcase. And interestingly enough, and you don't need to read the fine print, I will. Interestingly enough, the only damage was, let's see, the car was found that the valve lifters had collapsed and the exhaust valves were closed, but the pistons had not seized in the cylinders. You see why the military wanted it. and didn't want the Russians to have it. I put this in here just as another point of reference. I'm trying to give you 1,000 points of light of different aspects of this product line and its uniqueness. This is USF&G, one of the major insurers in the United States. They have, and I can't remember now how many decades they have been the insurers for Champion lubricants. And if you look down at the fine print, and I'll even alert you to the zeros after the commas, and the fact that above it says these numbers are in thousands, so that isn't thousands there. There's $2 million of insurance coverage per occurrence. If you know anything about the insurance industry, to get $2 million per occurrence coverage that you could afford to pay the premium on is pretty impossible. These guys have it, and they've had it for a long time because USF&G has never had a single claim against the product. $30, $40, whatever years ago when USF&G first took them over, it was $1 million per occurrence after they saw they weren't getting, in the short term, any claims. But then as the decades rolled on, the premiums kept going down, and they asked Mr. Heaton, you want $2 million per occurrence, so that would look good for the customer. You know, $2 million, you got it. And they still haven't had to pay a nickel out. Okay, I'm going to give you some other interesting insights into the complications of being, again, in the retail market and trying to deal with the hassles of not having to do anything other than load a 55-gallon drum onto a pallet and send it somewhere, because they were quite content to do that. But over the decades, they're just getting more and more pressure, saying, you know, hey, we want some of that. What do we have to do? Well, when I was working with the company again here locally, I knew what the product's benefits were, so I went to our local municipality, Phoenix, and reviewed with their maintenance fleet personnel this product. And long story short, again, because of the plethora of additives out there, they were just like, you know, oh, that's nice and great, thanks. Don't call us, we'll call you, and thanks for coming in. No matter what you tell them, my point of what I am showing and will be showing is, I guess I'll use this one, but I also went to the city of Scottsdale. Punchline here is the same for both letters. Went to the city of Scottsdale, PD, the police department, because I know they drive their cars hard, and in our weather, it ain't hard to do. And Scottsdale PD was at least willing, just because I kind of sidestepped the bean counters at the head office, they actually got down to the mechanics bay, and we got 2 police vehicles completely treated, and they drove around for a month. But within a matter of, it was the first week, from what I recollect, that the mechanic that worked the mechanic bay for the vehicles, whether it's weekly or daily overhauls, monitoring, the cops themselves were coming back to the mechanic going, Joe, what the heck did you do? That tranny's running smooth as day. I can't believe it. The temperature was 120 on the asphalt yesterday, and that usually spells one, you know, it was a mess for that number 27 or whatever vehicle it was. The heat just was wrecking. I was trying to get in the acceleration, and the trannies are clunking, and it's all gone. What did you do? I didn't do anything. We just put this oil blend in here, and you like it, huh? Temperature reduction has a lot of benefits all unto itself. But the problem is, and as maybe some of you have caught, and again, welcome to the capitalist state, the list that you're looking at there are all the prerequisites the city had to have you, the hoops you had to jump through before they could use the product that would save the city and the taxpayers money and extend the life of the equipment and generally be of nothing but benefit. You had to jump through hoops that, long story short, because this was the first thing, of course, I ran by the parent company when I hit this, was, okay, we have like 3 of these things, you know, OSHA forms, we have that, But these other issues, I'm going, oh, why don't we have the SAE engineering analysis report? That's about $2 million. I said, what? He said, yeah, it cost us about $2 million, and this was 15 years ago. About $2 million for us to get that type of a technical approval that they're requiring. And we just felt we didn't need to spend the money. We were making all we need. And so we're really not interested in doing that. Sell it to anybody that you don't have to spend $2 million. That's just one point. There are several other points on these lists. The EPA, the DOE, DOT, GSA, all these requirements that you have to deal with before they'll even look at your product. And long story short, again, because the independence of this family-run, family-owned business, they just said, no, if that's what you're demanding of us, we don't need your business that bad. You need our product far more than we need your business. And we're not going to spend, I think the total was, when it was all said and done, and to do a realistically serious retail marketing campaign, they were looking like $300 million. And they just said, no, we'd rather just keep the money in the bank. And especially, because this is the transition point where they didn't even have enough of the raw material, but they knew they were about to with the second mine coming online. But they just said, look, we don't need to spend all that money. We're going to be selling this stuff as fast as we can put it in containers. So they don't want to do it, Tyler, don't worry about it. And, yeah, well, but they loved it. It's the bean counters upstairs. You can't stop them. The mechanics, of course, love this stuff. And of course, you don't want to see this list for California. what you got to jump through to get them to do anything that has to do with a burning of motor, let alone leaves. And I'm going to get into how much time do I have left on the film? Okay, I'm going to get into some of the technical application aspects here at the end, but I'm going to get off of this Cook's tour we've been having of the ups and downs and odds and ends of the 50-year history of this product, and leave you with this one letter on this subject that I think is quite insightful, because it addresses the point I was making at the outset about the Heaton name and why they don't and didn't, and still to this day really haven't, exposed themselves to the mainstream public market as one would expect when you've got something that seems like miracle in a bottle. Just to skip down here, and this, well, I guess might as well have it on the record. Court Exhibit B, that yes, this is also from Mr. Heaton. Yeah, you can see that. 1989, in fact. And I'm just going to read the couple salient paragraphs. Out of deference to your interests, I will endeavor to provide you with some answers. So the distributor that's inquiring with some of the obvious questions you've already heard me allude to. I should explain why we give out limited information. We are still selling to the same customers we were selling to 42 years ago, namely the major oil companies. We do not like to give out the names of the many individuals in any one company that buy our products. They are not authorized by their management to make statements, no matter how successful our product has been or how many millions they may have saved in downtime. Their business is to sell lubricants to the masses. It is not to sell our product. It would be awkward for them, to say the least, since our major production goes to them. We see no reason to jeopardize a good relationship. Read between the lines there. We are a closed corporation and have always maintained a low profile. Many times we have put our product into a whole oil and market our products that way. A quick example, one of the more recent ones that I get a particular tickle out of. We all know Slick 50. Right? Wonder product, Slick 50. But they never had a transmission additive product. Slick 50 never had any tranny until about 10 years ago now, or probably only 8 now. Well, guess what Slick 50's can of transmission additive is? Nothing but our product in their can with their label. And of course, Mr. Heaton has no problem with that. You've just heard in his own words. It's not an issue of him selling his product with name recognition. Retail market's not that important to him. He'll even let a retailer slap their name on a product that is 100% Champion lubricants. We could, but we have been doing very well for the past 4 decades and see no reason to change. If we did put these products in a whole oil, we would be fighting the very same companies that have given us a fine business as it is. You have already been given over 100 pages of history and documentation that covers at least 40 years and a wide variety of directions that our products have been in. I tried to give you just a synopsis taste of what he's alluding to here in hundreds of documents because, yeah, I've got them all, but we're not going to stay here all day. Among them are sales we have made with defense contractors and work we have done for the space programs. We have had as many as 60 people working in our Stevensville plant as we lubricated hundreds of thousands of space parts. We eventually moved that operation to the General Dynamics plant and subsequently received royalties for the work done there. You'll have to understand we can only relate to you things that are in the past and information that is public knowledge. Information on current activity must be withheld. I'll let you read between the lines, but I think you get the drift. Current interests outside the operations of Champion are in communication towers, precious metals, food establishments, and telling people my company is not for sale. I even heard those stories. It seems like 3 months wouldn't go by where one of the major oil companies wasn't pitching him an offer to buy him out. After the first 2 or 3 years of trying to steal the VAC 5 formula, it's like a James Bond movie, the lengths that the oil companies went to. And finally, desperation and exasperation, even though the whole time they're buying his product. They're doing everything they can to find out, to copy, to get their scientists to break it down. And to this day, still, no one, besides pronunciation difficulties, no one has figured out what bactyl isocryptine is. See if there's any other punchlines in here. That may have sounded like a fictitious statement about the company. But the point is, I have seen many offers. I do not intend to sell the company. It will always be under family control. The products have never been duplicated, and we serve the public well and with consideration. So he's got his heart in the right place, but, you know, business is business. The public that he is serving well, you might even consider you as being a citizen of the country our military protects us. So we're all being served, but the military gets the lion's share of every year's manufacture amount of this product. One thing I should clear up, because you have heard the word moly. And a lot of people, I knew I had some water here. It's okay, we're getting down to the final stretch here. I mentioned moly earlier before we actually really started, so I will have to reiterate a couple things, sorry. The moly is not the unique aspect here. Molybdenum is available to anybody that wants to buy it from Climax Mining. 4 years, it only settled out 4%. And that is and was and still remains the death knell of all these molybdenum, black gold, and all these products you heard about 10, 15 years ago that were just leaping all over the market. Moly, protective. Absolutely. I'm going to show you briefly fantastic protective capabilities of just molybdenum, but not doing you any good if it's all lying at the bottom of your crankcase. This micronization process left it in suspension. So not only was it always in the oil, but as I'm showing you now, what molybdenum does at a microscopic level is plates. That's what you're looking at there is the upper surface of a metal surface, which, as we all know, when you get down to the electron scanning microscopic level, there is nothing that's smooth on this planet practically. And then right above it is a thin sheeting plate of molybdenum, which, even without the Champion VAC 5 additive, will plate, as the illustration shows, kind of like mica is another good example to mentally visualize the layering of mica, the mineral, is like a stack of cards. More pressure you put on them, the more they squeeze and spread out and continue a smooth, flat surface. Well, and there's some more nice, smooth, flat surface of metal. You can see that it's quite a craggy mess. And I think this metal is a pretty fine piece of metal. Yeah, it's from a Swiss watch. It looks like the surface of Mars when you magnify it. Well, that's why there's friction. That's why stuff wears out. That's why the irregularities of metal on metal do so much damage. And sure, you could plate them with the moly and get a lot of benefit as opposed to nothing. But when you add the back 5 to that moly, if it is in a micronized level small enough, because what the back 5 itself does is it's a penetrating lubricant. It actually seeps to about 3 microns deep into the metal surface itself. And if you have moly in that blend, not only is the back 5 seeping in, and not only does moly plate anyways, now double that concept because you're now penetrating and pulling moly into the metal to a depth of 3 microns with the back 5 and the surface plating of the moly alone. Those two combined give you, we have documented, again, you see on the list there, friction reductions from 30 to 60%. And that just saves you, that one point alone saves you across so many boards of issues of the reality of how and when and what wears out motors. Okay. How much time left? I'm almost done, mercifully. Because I'm not trying to sell you anything here. I'm just trying to enlighten, inform, throw so much knowledge at you that you'll be asleep within the next 8 minutes. Guess we'll go with this one. You've seen more recent additive companies. Name any one of them, they all do the same thing. Where they give you that old infamous before and after photo stuff. Same thing here. It's just that they're now able to, with the wonders of modern science and whiz-bang and fantastic, able to make that black, charred, gummy thing look better. Okay. This product did the same thing 56 years ago. It didn't have any high-tech anything short of the back 5 mystery ingredient to this day. Well, Heaton, I believe, didn't take it to his grave. I think the kids have it somewhere in a vault. Let's hope. Because I've seen these, I've got some of these pictures like this that are like from that 1949 trucking company. You know, and you want to see some old, weird-looking parts, but they're clean and they ain't damaged. I'm going to use this just as an example to fly through here, because you've heard we're talking a lot about gas and oil additives. You heard a fleeting reference to hydraulic and transmission. Well, there's a variety of these blends for varieties of applications. Just the hydraulic lift, for example, in a standard auto garage can be nightmarish in its upkeep, maintenance, and more importantly, safety. You'd be surprised. I guess what happens, what they call it, at least in the industry for hydraulic fluid, is I think they call it foaming and bubbling. And when hydraulic fluid gets to that state, it oftentimes can deteriorate to the point where it's not capable of doing what it's supposed to be doing, which is holding up that car that the mechanic is underneath right now. And there have been failures just because the hydraulic fluid had lost its ability to do its job. There's a hydraulic additive blend of this product. Solves that problem. No more foaming and bubbling. Transmission blends. The oil blend, of course, we've heard enough about. This stuff, I just want to show you that from a picture standpoint, I don't know how many tons that diesel engine, railroad engine weighs, but trying to make a point of all the different applications that there are, in fact, in the world beyond your truck or your car. And these guys are there and have been there. The shipping industry. I've got some fascinating documents regarding these kinds of massive compressor units that weigh in the hundreds of tons, that the owners are loving this product because this stuff breaks. It can end your fiscal year real quick. Hydraulic treatment. Gear lube. This is not for automatic transmissions. This is for like stick shifts, differentials, grease applications. You've heard of lithium greases and molybdenum greases. Now you can imagine a molybdenum grease with this formula in it. how much better it becomes. I'm going to leave it there because I want you to be able to ask any questions that we want to have on film. And since we got 2 or 3 minutes left? Sir.
I have been reading lately that if you run an automobile engine on hydrogen, that it burns the lubricant off the walls of the cylinder immediately. Does your product resist this hydrogen burn?
You know, that's good. That's good. I like that. That's the question you'd only get in an exotic research conference or similar function thereof, because no, that kind of testing has not been done yet. And just before you ask, we don't know what plasma implosion does with this product either. But yeah, the future world will be analyzing those kinds of applications, because here we are 56 years later. Gosh, the second generation of lubrication's got to come soon, doesn't it? Here's a guy who was 50 years ahead of everybody else, and here we are still 56 years later. Really no changes, no cutting edge new. I'll give you a synthetic, that qualifies as new, but that's apples and oranges. We're talking about what can you add to oil that's in your car right now, as opposed to what you can add this to synthetic. It is compatible. We're waiting for the next generation, I guess, of equipment to see something's got to finally eclipse this product, but it ain't happened yet. Yes? Considering it was ad-libbed, I'll accept that, thank you.
But what I think you should announce, you told about the name of the company, but you never shared what your name is and where people can contact you to discuss how they can get this.
I at this stage, I thank you for that. I'll jump around on that. You guys didn't get this on camera? My name tag? No. No, I'm infamous in this building. I'm known by all, good or bad. But yeah, I did say my name at the beginning of this, didn't I? Well, that's right. I didn't want to be identified. I'd have political aspirations. I no longer actively am a distributor for the product. I did talk a lot about some of the things I have done with the product, but more importantly, it was kind of like my work here, once a year. It's getting access to the information that I found valuable, even though we were not successful. I guess I should explain that. We were not successful out of Scottsdale, where I was Director of Public Relations for this attempt to retail it and the first ever 12-ounce bottle applications and whatnot. No, and as I said, I'm going to explain that. For about 1.5 years. And of course, the product was very successful. That's the stuff I put in the Scottsdale PD car. That wasn't the problem. The problem was that, as I kind of alluded to midway in this conversation, the parent company was just kind of like, yeah, okay, good luck, go to it, but didn't want anything else to deal with it, you know. For example, they have lots of money, but $30 million just to get certification and stuff that we don't really care. If you don't want the product, then you don't get the product. We're not going to go buy your ability to use our product. We got a line of people that want it. And if you don't see that, fine. I wasn't going to argue with them. I see their point. And so they were right at that transition point. So we didn't get a lot of, because of course all the people we were trying to sell it to were coming to us going, who can we talk to that's used it? You know, all I could do was show them that this material that has been released, but I couldn't call them up and say, call Phil over at 3M, Monsanto, and DuPont, and he'll connect you with all the buyers and what they're doing with it. Never going to happen. Let me just finish the punchline of why it failed. And I knew going in this was going to be a tough deal, and you'll see what I mean. I was brought in from California about, I guess I've lived here now 15 years. I was brought in because the vice president of this retailing attempt out at Scottsdale knew me personally from my work as the assistant to the vice president of Herbalife International's world headquarters in Los Angeles, where I'd been for a couple of years. And he knew I did good work, and he knew I got things done, and he knew he wanted me with this company, and most importantly, he doubled my salary. And I said, what time do you want me there? And but once I got here, and you have to understand, Herbalife is multi-level marketing. It's an MLM. Legitimate,